Ladies and gentlemen, let's raise a glass. The ballroom at the downtown hotel went silent as my boss, Richard Keller, stood at the podium. His voice boomed across the chandeliers and velvet curtains. Every face turned to him, champagne flutes glittering in their hands. It was supposed to be a night of celebration, the launch of our newest product line, the one I had poured 2 years of my life into, the one I'd sacrificed weekends, birthdays, and even the last few months of my marriage for. But Richard had other plans. "She's leaving," he said with a smirk, his eyes finding mine across the room. "She never really had what it takes." The room erupted in polite laughter and applause, like trained seals responding to their master's cue. My name wasn't even mentioned. I was just she. Disposable. I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't flinch. I stood slowly, smoothed the hem of my blazer, and picked up the envelope I'd been carrying all evening. My hand didn't shake as I walked to the podium. "To Richard," I said, raising my glass. My voice was steady, almost calm. "From the company's biggest failure." I set the envelope in front of him and turned on my heel. No tears, no protest, just silence. Behind me, I heard the rip of paper, then Richard's voice breaking. "What the hell is this?" But I didn't stop walking. I should introduce myself. My name is Linda Harris. I was 43 years old, and until that night, I was the head of product development at Stonemount Technologies, one of Chicago's fastest-growing firms. For 11 years, I gave that company everything. I started as a junior analyst, stayed late when others left early, carried projects on my back while executives like Richard claimed the credit. And I believed in it. I believed that if I worked hard enough, if I proved myself, I'd earn the recognition I deserved. But I was wrong. 3 weeks earlier, Richard called me into his office. He leaned back in his leather chair, all false charm and manicured confidence. "Linda, you've been doing good work, but this launch, it needs a fresh face, energy, someone younger. We'll have Jason present instead." Jason, the intern I trained, a 25-year-old with good hair and no experience. I stared at Richard, waiting for the punchline. "Excuse me?" "You'll still be part of the team," he said with mock sympathy. "But it's time we show investors a more dynamic leader. Don't take it personally." Don't take it personally. That was the day I realized I had no future at Stonemount. Not because I wasn't capable, but because Richard had decided I was replaceable, disposable. What he didn't know was that I'd already seen the cracks in his empire. For months, I'd noticed irregularities in the reports. Product testing results that didn't line up, expenses signed off without proper documentation, inflated performance metrics in investor decks. Every time I brought them up, Richard waved me off. "You're overthinking again, Linda. Focus on the product." But my instincts told me otherwise. And I had learned long ago. Instincts don't lie. So I started keeping records, copies of reports, email threads, meeting notes. Quietly, carefully. Not because I wanted revenge, not yet, but because something in my gut whispered that one day I'd need them. That day came sooner than I expected. The night of the launch, I knew what Richard was planning. The smirk, the toast, the dismissal disguised as a joke. He wanted to humiliate me, to show the board that he was in control, that he could push out the woman who had built the very product they were celebrating. But I wasn't going to leave quietly. The envelope I placed on the podium? It wasn't just paper. It was the culmination of 6 months of documentation. Evidence of manipulated product data, falsified safety certifications, and doctored investor reports. All under Richard's direction. Inside were copies of contracts and memos that proved our flagship product, the one they toasted that night, hadn't passed critical safety tests. That Richard had buried those results to rush the launch and impress investors. And I wasn't the only one who had them. When I walked out of that ballroom, past the clapping colleagues and the wide-eyed interns, I felt a strange calm settle over me. For the first time in months, I wasn't afraid. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I drove through the rain-slicked streets of Chicago, headlights blurring against the glass. My hands gripped the wheel, my mind replaying the sacrifices I'd made. The dinners I'd missed with my daughter Emma, the fights with my husband that eventually broke us. All for a company that had decided I was worthless. But they had underestimated me. Richard thought I'd crumble, that I'd accept the insult and fade away quietly. But he had no idea that I'd already contacted someone who was very interested in what I'd found. His laughter at the podium was still echoing in my ears when I pulled into my driveway. Only this time, I wasn't the one being laughed at, because Richard Keller had no idea how fast his empire was about to collapse. And I wasn't done yet. When I woke the next morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds, but there was no peace in it. My phone had already buzzed half a dozen times. Missed calls from Richard, 2 from our HR director, Marianne, 1 from a number I didn't recognize. I ignored them all. Instead, I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, staring at the briefcase I'd brought home months earlier. Inside, beneath layers of ordinary paperwork, were files I'd been collecting since Richard took over as CEO 18 months ago. The first irregularities seemed small. Travel expenses signed without receipts, bonuses distributed without board approval. But then it escalated. Product safety results altered, emails instructing staff to reframe numbers before investor calls, contracts signed with suppliers that never delivered. I should have walked away then. But part of me believed I could fix it, that my job was to protect the company I had given more than a decade of my life to. Now, as I opened the briefcase, I realized this was no longer about protecting Stonemount. It was about protecting myself. And maybe, just maybe, protecting the people who trusted the company's products with their lives. By noon, the calls turned into voicemails. "Linda, it's Richard. We need to talk. You've made a mistake. This is Marianne from HR. Please call me back immediately. We need to discuss your exit paperwork." And finally, one that made my stomach twist. "This is Daniel Briggs, legal counsel for Stonemount Technologies. It's imperative you return the documents you removed. Failure to do so may result in legal action." Legal action. They were moving fast, but so was I. At 2 o'clock, I drove to the west side, to a small bank I'd opened a safe deposit box at years ago. The clerk greeted me with a smile, clearly recognizing me as a longtime customer. "Morning, Ms. Harris." I nodded politely and asked for access to my box. Inside, I placed duplicates of the most damning files: the falsified safety test results, the emails with Richard's initials approving them, the doctored investor presentation slides. I locked it up tight. I wasn't naive. I knew evidence in my home could disappear in a burglary. But evidence in a bank vault? That was harder to erase. When I returned to my car, I sat for a long moment, staring at the steering wheel. My heart thudded against my ribs. This wasn't a game anymore. Richard wasn't just trying to humiliate me at a party. He was trying to silence me. That evening, I called Emma, my daughter. She was 21, a senior in college, juggling classes and part-time work at a bookstore. "Mom, what's going on?" she asked the second she picked up. "I saw something online. People are saying you left Stonemount." I hesitated. I didn't want to worry her, but I also couldn't lie. "It's true. Richard pushed me out." "That's insane. You've given them everything." "I know." My throat tightened. "But listen, Emma, I need you to focus on school. Don't get involved in this." Silence stretched on the line. "Are you in trouble?" "No," I lied softly. "I'm handling it. I just need you to trust me." When we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my kitchen, staring at the phone in my hand. The truth was, I wasn't sure how much trouble I was in, but I knew one thing. Richard's panic meant I had more power than I'd realized. On Sunday, a black SUV idled outside my house for over an hour. I pretended not to notice, drawing the curtains and keeping the lights low. By the time it drove away, my decision was made. I couldn't fight Richard alone. I needed help. Someone outside Stonemount. Someone who wouldn't be intimidated by corporate lawyers or silenced by money. That night, I dug out an old contact card from the back of my desk drawer. It belonged to Sarah Levin, a former colleague who had left the industry years ago to work with a consumer safety watchdog group. We hadn't spoken in nearly a decade, but I remembered the last thing she said to me before leaving. "Linda, one day you'll realize some battles aren't meant to be fought inside the company. Call me when that day comes." It was time. My hands trembled as I dialed her number. After 3 rings, she answered. "Linda Harris," she said, her voice calm but firm, as if she'd been expecting this call all along. "Tell me what you've got." I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I pulled together a clean folder of evidence and notes, stripping away anything that could be dismissed as interpretation and leaving only hard facts. As the hours ticked by, I felt something shift inside me. Fear was still there, yes. But alongside it came clarity. Richard thought I was just a failure he could humiliate and discard. What he didn't understand was that failures don't usually have receipts. And by Monday morning, those receipts would be in the hands of people who knew exactly what to do with them. Monday morning arrived gray and heavy, the kind of Chicago day where the sky feels like concrete pressing down. I barely touched my coffee. My nerves weren't about caffeine. They were about the folder sitting in my bag and the meeting ahead. Sarah had been clear on the phone. "Bring only what you're comfortable losing. Keep the rest secure. We'll start with enough to get their attention." By 9 o'clock, I was walking through the revolving glass doors of a midtown office building, my heels clicking against the marble floor. The lobby directory read, "Consumer Safety Watch Alliance, Suite 1500. The receptionist greeted me warmly, as if I weren't just another stranger. "Ms. Harris? Sarah's expecting you." When I stepped into the conference room, Sarah rose from her chair with the same steady energy I remembered. Her hair was streaked with gray now, but her eyes were sharp, assessing. She hugged me briefly before motioning to 2 other people at the table. "This is Mark Collins, investigative journalist with the Tribune, and Alicia Morales, a litigation attorney who specializes in whistleblower protection." For a moment, my throat closed. This was bigger than I had imagined. I'd thought we'd talk strategy, maybe explore options. Instead, I was staring at 2 professionals who could take my story public and defend me in court. I placed the folder on the table. My voice was quiet, but firm. "This is just a fraction of what I've collected, enough to show a pattern." Mark leaned forward immediately, flipping through copies of test reports, email threads, and financial documents. His brows furrowed. "These safety certifications, if they're falsified, that's a huge liability. We're talking recalls, lawsuits, maybe even criminal charges." Alicia glanced up from her notes. "And your termination? When did that happen?" "Technically, they haven't processed it yet. Richard tried to push me out at the launch event. HR's been calling nonstop." Her lips tightened. Classic. They want you to sign something that waives your rights before you realize the leverage you have. Don't sign anything. Not a severance package, not a resignation. Sarah rested her hands flat on the table. "Linda, you need to understand something. Once you step into this, there's no turning back. Richard will fight dirty. The company will paint you as disgruntled, unstable, anything to discredit you. Are you ready for that?" I thought of Emma, of the years I'd missed bedtime stories and soccer games because I was chasing deadlines, of the envelope on Richard's podium, his smug face turning red, of the black SUV parked outside my house. "Yes," I said quietly. "I'm ready." The meeting lasted 3 hours. We mapped out next steps. Alicia would file for federal whistleblower protection, ensuring retaliation could be challenged legally. Mark would begin verifying the documents independently, but nothing would be published until we were secure. Sarah's group would prepare to notify regulators if the internal channels failed. By the time I walked out of the building, the weight on my shoulders hadn't disappeared, but it had shifted. I wasn't alone anymore. Still, fear lingered. That evening, while I cooked a simple dinner of pasta and salad, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Richard or HR. It was Emma. "Mom, are you okay? I saw another post online. Some guy claiming you were escorted out by security?" My grip on the wooden spoon tightened. Don't believe everything you read. I wasn't escorted out. I walked out on my own. But is it true? Did they really fire you? I hesitated. They tried. Let's just say I didn't make it easy. Emma sighed. I hate that they're treating you like this. You've worked so hard for them. I swallowed against the lump in my throat. That's exactly why I'm not letting them bury this. One day you'll understand why standing your ground matters, even when it costs you. There was a pause. Then her voice softened. I think I already do. At 9 o'clock sharp, a knock rattled my front door. I froze. Through the peephole, I saw Richard himself standing on my porch, his jaw tight, his tailored suit out of place in my modest neighborhood. Linda, open the door, he called, his voice sharp but forced calm. We need to settle this before it gets out of hand. I didn't move. My heart hammered in my chest, but I stayed silent. After a long moment, he pulled a thick envelope from his briefcase and slid it under the door. This is my final offer. Sign it and this all goes away. You'll be comfortable for the rest of your life. I waited until his car pulled away before picking it up. The severance offer was larger than before. 5 years' salary, a non-disclosure clause, immediate payout. But as I stared at it, I knew the truth. Comfort bought by silence wasn't comfort at all. I placed the envelope in the shredder. The sound of paper tearing was louder than his voice in my memory. That night, I lay in bed wide awake, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the distant whoosh of traffic. Richard thought money would shut me up. He thought fear would keep me quiet. But the truth was bigger than my fear. Bigger than him. And by the end of the week, the world would know it. Tuesday started with a call from Alicia at 8:07 a.m., her voice crisp and awake in a way I wasn't. Filings are in, she said. Federal whistleblower protections requested. Formal complaints initiated with the Consumer Product Safety Commission and the SEC. Today is about preserving the record. Do not meet anyone from Stone Mount alone. Noted, I said, staring at the steam lifting off my coffee like a warning flare. By mid-morning, Sarah looped me into a secure video call with her team. 2 tracks, she said. Internal notice to Stone Mount's audit committee, so they can't claim surprise, and an external preservation request to their counsel. Once they're on legal notice, destroying evidence becomes a much bigger problem for them. A half hour later, my inbox pinged with a litigation hold notice from Stone Mount's outside counsel, instructing all employees to preserve emails, messages, drafts, even handwritten notes related to product testing and investor communications. I wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or afraid. A hold meant they knew this was real. Mark, the journalist, called after lunch. I'm still verifying, he said, measured, careful. I've spoken with 2 engineers who corroborate pressure on testing. One agreed to go on background if needed. I'm also chasing down the lab. The lab meant the independent facility contracted for thermal and battery tests. Late afternoon, Mark texted, Lab manager won't comment, but gave me report IDs that match your copies. That's as close to confirmation as I'll get before publication. It was a small, sober victory. Wednesday brought a different kind of pressure. HR emailed to clarify that my employment status was under review and requested a meeting to discuss next steps and mutual options. Alicia replied on my behalf. All communication through counsel. Minutes later, my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. Ms. Harris, this is Robert Ames, chair of the audit committee. We'd like to speak with you. Today, if possible. My attorney will coordinate, I said. He exhaled, the sound of a man who just realized the ground beneath him had shifted. That evening, Emma came by with takeout and concern in her eyes. We ate quietly at my kitchen table, the way we had when she was little, and homework spread between us like a second meal. Are you scared? She asked finally. Yes, I said, because I wouldn't lie to her. But scared isn't the same as wrong. She reached for my hand. I'm proud of you, Mom. Thursday moved faster. Alicia confirmed the SEC had acknowledged receipt and opened a matter number. The CPSC requested a preliminary call the following Monday. Sarah's team drafted a public statement I could release if Stonemount attacked me personally. Mark called at 5:20 p.m. My editors greenlit a story for tomorrow morning, he said. Careful language, multiple sources, documents reviewed. You won't be named beyond what's already public. Former head of product development. Are you ready? No one is ready for their life to become a headline, but I said yes. I barely slept. At 6:03 a.m., Friday, my phone buzzed with the link. The headline wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. Documents suggest safety concerns preceded product launch at Stonemount Technologies. The first paragraph said everything in plain English. Internal emails and test summaries indicated failing results. Leadership pressed to proceed anyway. Investors had received slide decks that omitted failure rates. By 7 a.m., my messages were a wall. Former colleagues, quiet thank yous from people who'd been afraid to speak, a curt no comment forwarded from Stonemount's PR team. At 7:42, a mass email went out to employees. All external inquiries to PR. Do not delete any files. At 8:15, the company's website replaced the triumphant launch banner with a smaller sentence. We are reviewing additional data and will provide an update. The celebration had turned into a pause. Richard left a voicemail at 8:31. I didn't need to listen to the whole thing to hear the rage. You've made a grave mistake. You think anyone will hire you after this? You think you're a hero? You're a liability, Linda. Alicia texted me 2 minutes later. Do not respond. We've preserved the voicemail. At 9:10, Mark sent a screenshot of Stonemount's statement. We take safety seriously, we follow rigorous protocols, we categorically deny falsifying results. The usual choreography. Then, near the bottom, we have placed one executive on administrative leave pending review. No name. They didn't need to spell it out for me. By noon, a second story appeared online. An analyst note, cautious but clear. Short-term volatility expected. Governance risk elevated. Stonemount's stock dipped a few points. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to make the board feel heat. At 12:37, another email from the audit chair. Formal request to meet Monday with the committee and outside counsel. Your attorney is welcome. I forwarded it to Alicia. We'll attend on our terms, she wrote back. Full transcript, no off the record, and they provide their preservation actions in writing. Through the afternoon, the house felt too quiet. I washed dishes I'd already washed, folded the same towel twice. Around 3, Emma texted a photo of a handwritten sign in her campus bookstore window. Be kind to the person in front of you. You don't know what they're carrying. I stared at it longer than made sense and felt my eyes burn. At 4:22 p.m., an unknown number flashed. I let it go to voicemail. A moment later, a text arrived from the same number. I can't call from work. They're moving files out of the shared drive to someone's personal archive. Check timestamps on QA folder Q4-launch. I'm sorry. I didn't recognize the initial, but the detail was too specific to ignore. I called Alicia immediately. If they're touching timestamps after a hold notice, it's serious, she said. Forward me everything. We'll inform counsel and regulators. Now. I forwarded the message to Sarah as well. She replied within minutes. We'll snapshot public-facing artifacts and note any changes. Don't confront anyone directly. As the winter light thinned, I sat in the living room without turning on a lamp. For months, maybe years, the truth had been something I carried alone, heavy and sharp. Now it was out in the world, documented, time-stamped, read by strangers over morning coffee. It should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like standing in the doorway of a house after the fire's out, counting what's left. At 6:09 p.m., another email landed. This one from an address I didn't expect. rkeller@stonemounttech.com. No subject line, just a single sentence. You don't know what you've done. I closed my laptop and let the room go dark. He was wrong. I knew exactly what I'd done. And on Monday, in a glass-walled conference room with a court reporter and a dozen eyes on me, I would say it all again. Monday morning, the air inside Stone Mountain's headquarters was different. Gone was the bravado of product launches and investor calls. In its place, silence, broken only by the nervous shuffle of employees avoiding eye contact. Alicia walked beside me, her presence steady. We were escorted into the boardroom where a court reporter waited, fingers poised above the keys. Across the long table sat the audit committee, outside counsel, and Richard himself. His jaw was tight, his suit immaculate, but the confidence I once saw in him was gone. "Ms. Harris," the chair began, "thank you for attending. We want to assure you this meeting is about transparency." I didn't reply. I slid a smaller folder across the table. Alicia spoke for me. "These are supplemental documents. Emails and reports already shared with regulators. We expect written confirmation of how the company intends to preserve all relevant evidence." Richard leaned forward, his voice sharp. "You're destroying this company, Linda. Do you understand that?" I met his eyes for the first time. "No, Richard. You did that when you decided profit mattered more than safety. I just stopped you from burying it." The room went still. The court reporter's keys clicked, every word preserved. For the next 2 hours, I answered questions calmly, fact by fact. No speculation, no theatrics. Just the truth, documented in black and white. By the end, the board members avoided Richard's gaze, their silence louder than any verdict. When it was over, Alicia gathered our things. Outside the building, the winter air bit at my cheeks. She exhaled. "That was it, Linda. You've done your part. Now it's theirs to untangle." Weeks later, headlines confirmed what we already knew. Stone Mountain announced a recall of its flagship product. Regulators launched full investigations. 2 board members resigned. And Richard Keller? Suspended pending federal inquiry. I wasn't named in the company's statements, but whispers traveled. Some called me a whistleblower, others a traitor. The labels didn't matter. I had Emma to think about, and the quiet certainty that I hadn't looked away when it counted. One evening, sitting with my daughter over takeout again, she asked softly, "Do you regret it?" I thought of the years I gave to Stone Mount, of the sleepless nights, the humiliation at that launch. And then I thought of the folder, the court reporter, the truth laid bare. "No," I said finally. "I regret trusting the wrong people for too long, but I don't regret standing up when it mattered." Emma smiled faintly. "That's what I'll remember, Mom. Not the company. You." And that, more than any pension or title, was the legacy I could live with. "Sign this resignation, or we'll ruin your career." That's what the CFO snapped at me. Not asked, not suggested. Snapped. Like he was closing a cheap umbrella in the rain. I sat across from him, my pen already in hand. I looked at the paper. Crisp, white, printed with that clinical HR template font that looks like it was designed to murder personality. A single line at the bottom. Signature of employee. He leaned back, too smug for a man who'd been in the company less than 3 months. His suit was tailored, his shoes were polished like glass, and his tone carried the arrogance of someone who thought threats were the same as strategy. 15 years. That's how long I'd given this place. 15 years of late nights, of back-to-back audits, of babysitting executives through financial storms they barely understood. And now, apparently, my career could be ruined by a man who still thought Excel was magic. I signed. One clean stroke, no hesitation. Then I set the pen down, met his eyes, and said the only 2 words that mattered. "Good luck." He expected a meltdown. He expected tears, or maybe a begging speech about loyalty. What he got was me pushing my chair back, calm as the tide. If you're just tuning in, hit that subscribe button before we go deeper. 90% of you are listening without subscribing, and hey, I get it, commitment issues. But it helps more than you think. Keeps the stories flowing and the coffee strong. Now, back to the CFO who thought he owned me. He blinked when I stood. Maybe he thought I was bluffing, that I'd scribble something angry on the paper or refuse to leave until security dragged me out. But I didn't give him the satisfaction. I simply lifted my box, already packed. One coffee mug with a crack down the side, my wireless mouse, and a few sticky notes that had outlasted 4 CEOs. That was all I needed. "Security will escort you," he added, like I was about to steal the staplers. "Of course," I said, voice smooth as glass. I didn't need to touch the servers. I didn't need to log in, because everything important, every heartbeat of this company's financial infrastructure, already knew my name. The walk through the office was quiet. Too quiet. Denise from payroll looked up, her face pale. She mouthed, "He's going to regret this." I didn't nod, didn't even blink. Just kept moving. Past the intern glued to his phone. Past Greg in accounting, who leaned out and whispered, "What happened?" My silence was louder than words. The security guard, Raymond, didn't even stand. Just gave me a long look and asked softly, "You good?" "Golden," I said. And I was. 15 years of my life poured into this place, and all I carried out was a cardboard box. No framed pictures, no farewell speeches, just a mug, a mouse, and the kind of calm that only comes when you know the game isn't over. Because here's the truth they never understood. I wasn't disposable. I was the backbone. The forecasting systems, the automated reports, the risk models that guided millions of dollars, all of them had one name buried in their DNA. Mine. By the time I reached the parking lot, the weight of it all should have crushed me. 15 years dismissed with a signature. But instead, I felt light. Free. Not bitter. Not broken. Just aware. The CFO thought signing that resignation meant I was erased. What he didn't realize was that I'd already written myself into every critical function this company depended on. Not out of malice, out of necessity. No one ever asked how it worked. They only asked that it did. And so, as I dropped the box gently into the back seat of my car, I smiled. Because I knew something he didn't. Something the CEO would discover very soon. The first night, I didn't touch my laptop. I poured a glass of wine, put on some music, and let myself breathe. Let him think he'd won. Let him think the company had cut out dead weight. But the next morning, 9:13 a.m., my phone buzzed. A number I recognized but hadn't expected so soon. The CEO. His voice was tight, controlled but carrying an edge of panic. "Ava," he said, no greeting, no pleasantries. "Our biggest client is waiting. Every critical system is throwing the same error. Your name? Explain." I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch, long enough for him to hear his own breathing, long enough for him to realize who he was talking to. Finally, I said calmly, "I already did. Yesterday, with my signature." That was the moment the balance shifted. Not when I signed the resignation. Not when I walked out of the building. But right there, when the man who sat at the very top of the empire realized the only thing holding his company together was the woman he'd just let go. And that, my friends, was only the beginning. The CEO didn't breathe between sentences. "Ava, our biggest client is in the lobby. The dashboard won't load, the overnight jobs failed, and every error banner shows the same thing. Your name. Explain." I let the silence sit. Not to be petty, so he could hear what panic sounds like when it learns respect. "Read me the exact message," I said. He shuffled papers. Right operations paused. Owner calibration required. Last authorized maintainer, EVAR- and a code. There's also a note about role change detected and freeze to prevent stale model drift. "Good," I said. "Good?" He sounded like I'd told him the fire alarm was a lullaby. That means the compliance switch worked. When an admin profile is removed without a handoff, the model pauses writes and requires a recalibration session from an authorized owner. It's to keep people from brute-forcing forecasts the night before a board review. It's not sabotage. It's section 9.3 of the runbook you signed 2 years ago. He exhaled like a radiator. Can you come in? Right now. No, I said. Not without terms. No back-channel favors. We do this clean. He went quiet. Then, what do you need? An executed consulting agreement for 48 hours minimum, day rate attached, scope limited to assessment and restoration. Written indemnification that I'm operating under your direction, not the CFO's. Temporary credentials for read-only review, then supervised elevation for the calibration window. An email from legal confirming the freeze is a compliance feature, not misconduct. And when we're done, we discuss permanent structure. A beat. You'll have it in 10. Make it 15, I said. I'm making coffee. Quick pause. If you're listening without subscribing, this is the part you'll want receipts for. Hit the button. We're about to talk about the clause that kept me safe when a threat was supposed to end me. I set the phone down and opened my notebook. Paper, not digital. Old habit. If you lose access, you don't lose your brain. I wrote 3 lines. Timeline. Resignation yesterday. 1640. Tripwire. Admin role change detected overnight. Client window, unknown. Ask for their agenda time. My laptop chimed. 3 emails arrived within 12 minutes. Legal with a mutual NDA and a short form MSA. IT with a temporary badge and guest Wi-Fi QR. The CEO with a 1-line message. We proceed under your conditions. Client review at 1400 hours. I signed the DocuSign, checked the clock, 9:41, and texted a driver. If the city behaved, I'd be upstairs by 11:15. While the car crawled past a construction site, I replayed the moment I wrote section 9.3. 2 years ago, we'd shipped a rosy quarter because someone massaged inputs at midnight. The market didn't forget. Neither did I. We moved the model from persuadable to provable. Versioned data, immutable audit logs, and a lock that triggers on any admin detachment. If you want to change the engine, you bring the mechanic, with lights on and cameras rolling. The receptionist stood when I walked in, like she'd seen a ghost with paperwork. Ms. Ramos, your badge? Temporary's fine, I said. The badge printed with consultant in big letters. It felt honest. Upstairs, the air had that pre-storm taste. People smiled without their eyes. The CFO's door was open. He stood behind his desk, pretending to type. He didn't look up, and I didn't stop. Let him keep his performance. I had a job. It had set me up in a glass huddle room with a loaner laptop and a printed network diagram like it was 2003. Rachel from security. Smart, steady, brought me tea like we were human beings instead of tickets. Your read-only token, she said, sliding me a slip with a temporary username. We whitelisted the calibration endpoint for your session if legal greenlights it. Good, I said. Tell me the job failures. She pulled up a screen share. Nightly ingest ran, validation passed, but the right to forecast current blocked at 217 with the owner calibration flag. The last successful run was yesterday at 3:02. What did the client see? Stale dashboard with a yellow badge. They're not happy. Of course they're not, I said and typed. I couldn't touch anything that changed state yet, and that was the point. Read-only still told me the story. The log sequence was clean. SSO removed my admin group at 18:09 yesterday. The model's watcher process detected the role change at midnight UTC and tripped the freeze. The recalibration window opened at 6 a.m. and sat there, blinking like a seatbelt no one would click. I felt that old mix of anger and relief. Anger because we'd built a process to avoid exactly this. Relief because it worked. Threats don't break systems designed around truth. I walked the CEO through it in plain language. Right now, I said, your numbers aren't broken. They're paused. You can show the client last night's validated snapshot with a disclaimer, or we unlock and push a fresh run before 1400 hours. What does unlock mean? 15 minutes of calibration. Confirm data sources, verify weights against market deltas, and re-sign the release key. It needs an owner with context. That's by design. If anyone could jam run, your risk profile would be a roulette table. He pinched the bridge of his nose. Do it. Not until legal sends the indemnity, I said. If anything goes sideways, I won't be the scapegoat for a process that did exactly what it was built to do. He nodded. You'll have it. The CFO appeared in the doorway like a bad idea that learned to walk. This is unnecessary, he said. We can export last quarter and fudge the deltas. Clients don't care about pipes. Out, the CEO said without looking at him. The door stayed open but empty. Rachel raised an eyebrow that meant finally. Legal's email landed at 11:58 with every clause we'd named. I read every line. Then I slid my chair in, centered the keyboard, and let myself breathe once. Calm isn't a trick. It's a choice you practice. Starting calibration, I said, and Rachel started the screen recorder. The interface recognized the token, then my face through the webcam for the second factor the team added after the last audit. The checklist populated. Source freshness, anomaly thresholds, weight drift. Nothing dramatic, just the unglamorous heartbeats that keep a business honest. I confirmed the currency feed we knew was flaky on Mondays, corrected a vendor code someone fat-fingered last night, and compared the promo lift parameter against last week's pilot results. It wasn't heroics, it was care. At 12:21, the button lit. Re-enable rights. I hovered and didn't click. Ava? The CEO asked. Final condition, I said. After this meeting, we document the owner model and train 2 deputies. No more single points of failure, of me or anyone. He didn't hesitate. Agreed. I clicked. The job queue unclenched, the dashboard ingested, and the charts breathed. The room didn't cheer. It exhaled. I wasn't back. Not yet. But the numbers were, and for the next 90 minutes, the company had something more valuable than swagger. It had the truth. The CEO didn't breathe between sentences. Eva, our biggest client is waiting. The dashboard won't load, the overnight jobs failed, and every error shows the same thing. Your name. Explain. I let the silence sit. Not to be petty, so he could hear what panic sounds like when it learns respect. Read me the exact message, I said. He rustled papers. Right operations paused. Owner calibration required. Last authorized maintainer EVAR. Freeze due to role change. Drift prevention active. Good, I said. Good? That means the safeguard worked. When an admin profile is removed without a handoff, the system pauses rights and requires a supervised calibration. It's to keep people from forcing numbers the night before a review. It's not sabotage. It's policy. He exhaled. Can you come in? Right now. No, I said. Not without terms. We do this clean. A beat. What do you need? Short-form consulting agreement, 48 hours minimum. Written indemnification that I'm operating under your direction. Temporary read-only credentials, then monitored elevation for the calibration window. An email from legal stating the freeze is a built feature, not misconduct. After the client meeting, we discuss permanent structure. You'll have it. Make it quick, I said. Your clock is already running. Quick pause. If you're listening without subscribing, this is the part you'll want receipts for. Hit the button. Okay, back to work. By 9:52, the DocuSign landed. Legal sent a mutual NDA and a 2-page MSA. It followed with a temporary badge and a guest Wi-Fi QR. The CEO's email. We proceed under your conditions. Client at 1400 hours. I signed, grabbed my coat, called a car. The city moved like it always does when money's nervous, fast and pretending to be calm. The receptionist blinked when I walked in. Ms. Reyes, your badge? Consultant is fine, I said, and clipped on the plastic that told the truth. Upstairs, the air had that metallic taste it gets before a storm. The CFO's door was open. He was typing, eyes on nothing. I didn't stop. It had staged a glass huddle room with a loaner laptop. Rachel from security, steady hands, set a mug down. Your read-only token, she said. Calibration endpoint opens when legal says go. Good, I said. Walk me through the failures. Nightly ingest ran. Validation passed. Write to forecast, current blocked at 217 by owner calibration flag. Last successful publish was 3:02 yesterday. What did the client see? Stale dashboard with a yellow badge. They're agitated. Read only was enough to hear the story. IAM logs showed my admin group removed at 18:09. The watcher detected the change at midnight UTC, triggered the freeze, and opened a calibration window at 6 a.m. It waited. No one clicked it because no one understood it. That was the whole problem in one sentence. I called the CEO on speaker with Rachel present. Your numbers aren't broken. They're paused. Option A, show last night's validated snapshot with a note. Option B, we calibrate and push a fresh run before 1400 hours. What does calibrate mean in English? 15 minutes of checks, confirm source freshness, verify weights against current market deltas, re-sign the release key. The system wants a human who knows the context. That's by design. Do it. Not until legal sends indemnity, I said. If anything wobbles, I won't be the scapegoat for a process doing its job. He agreed. The CFO appeared in the doorway like a rumor. We can export last quarter and adjust. Clients want answers, not plumbing. Out, the CEO said, still on the line. The doorway emptied. Rachel let out a breath she'd been holding for months. Legal's email arrived at 11:56 with the language I'd asked for. I read every clause, then centered the keyboard. Calm isn't a trick, it's a habit. Starting calibration, I said, and Rachel started the screen recording. The checklist populated. Source freshness. Green, except a currency feed that burps on Mondays. Anomaly thresholds. Tightened last week, still sane. Weight drift. Minor uptick from the promo pilot, within bounds. Someone had fat-fingered a vendor code at 2214. I queued a correction in staging, documented it, and ran validation. No heroics, just care, with witnesses. At 12:21, the button lit. Re-enable rights. I didn't click. Ava? The CEO asked. Final condition, I said. After the client, we document the owner model and train 2 deputies. No more single points. Of me or anyone. Agreed. I clicked. The job queue unclenched. The dashboard inhaled. Bars and lines returned like someone turned on the lights. The room didn't cheer. It exhaled. I wasn't back. Not yet. But the numbers were, and the clock was kind again. For the next 90 minutes, the company had something better than swagger. It had the truth. I spent the early afternoon in the glass huddle room with Rachel, building a 2-slide fallback. Last night's validated snapshot as a PDF, and the freshly recalibrated view exported to a static file in case the network decided to be dramatic. Redundancy isn't paranoia, it's manners in my line of work. Uploads are in, Rachel said, setting a mug near my elbow. There's a local copy on the desktop too. Good, I said, and called the CEO on speaker. We start with governance, not glitter. You open. I explain why the freeze was a good thing. We show the snapshot, then the fresh run. We end with a concrete SLA and next steps. He agreed. They're bringing their VP Finance and Ops Director. Names? Priya and Ben. I wrote them down. People relax when you remember them. Before we headed in, I printed the audit summary. Role change detection overnight, calibration window in the morning, re-enable around midday, job IDs, hashes. Not to wave around, just to have in hand if someone questioned the chain of custody. The CFO drifted past the door, paused like a shadow pretending to be a wall, then kept moving. Fine by me. The conference room had that quiet money atmosphere. Glass walls, tired carpet, coffee that smelled ambitious. The CEO didn't waste lines. Thanks for coming. We had a protective freeze on our forecasting engine this morning. Ava will explain why that's a good thing. Heads turned. Priya's expression said, "Earn it." Ben said, "Don't waste time." In our system, I began, if an admin role is removed without a formal handoff, rights pause and a supervised calibration is required. It prevents last-minute manipulation and stale model drift. It's a seatbelt, annoying when the car is parked, essential when it's moving. Priya folded her hands. We saw a yellow badge on the dashboard first thing. Procurement flagged a hold on a purchase order before lunch. I understand, I said. This is last night's validated snapshot. I clicked. The PDF opened. You've seen this pattern before, and this, I advanced to the export, is the recalibrated view from today. 2 deltas, a currency feed correction after a Monday hiccup, and a vendor code error reversed with full log trace. No manual overrides. Ben leaned closer to the screen. What stopped you from publishing this morning? The missing handoff, I said. When my admin group was removed, the watcher assumed risk and waited for an authorized owner to calibrate. That's the design. You don't want a machine guessing where judgment belongs. The CFO cleared his throat. We could have presented last quarter and adjusted for... Respectfully, no, Priya said, without looking at him. We're not running inventory on vibes. Ben tapped his pen once. SLA when this happens. And how do you keep it from happening again? It shouldn't happen again, I said. We're implementing a dual-owner model, 2 trained deputies, 4 eyes calibration, and a documented runbook. If an owner leaves or changes role, the system routes to the deputies and opens a supervised window any senior analyst can initiate. If all 3 are unavailable, we serve the last validated snapshot with a red banner and CSV fallback. SLA. 2 hours to fresh publish during business hours, 4 off hours. You'll receive the runbook and contacts list by Friday. By Friday, Priya repeated. In writing, with names mine +2, I said. She watched me like a doctor reading an EKG. What if you're not here next week? Then Rachel and a trained deputy calibrate, I said. I won't carry special keys, that's the point. Systems should respect people, not worship them. The CEO nodded. We'll bake that into policy. Ben compared the chart to a printout he'd brought. The shape holds. Promo elasticity looks sane. It is, I said. We tightened anomaly thresholds last week. You'll have that note too. Priya closed her folder. Proceed with the purchase order. Conditional on receiving the runbook, the deputy training schedule, and an external review of the control design within 30 days. If the review fails, we reserve the right to reassess our contract. That's fair, I said. The CFO shifted like the chair had teeth. An external review is overkill. It's standard, Priya said, and frankly overdue. The meeting ended without applause, which is what competence sounds like. Outside, the hallway buzzed softly, relieved. The CEO paused near the door. Thank you, he said. Not big, not performative. Real. My office shortly? Send me the outline request, I said. I'll reply before I walk in. On the way back to the huddle room, I almost ran into the CFO. Up close, his cologne was loud, the kind people use when they don't have a point. You made me look incompetent, he said, low. You chose that look, I said. I presented facts. His jaw worked. We both know what you signed. Company IP, non-disparagement. If you try to position yourself as the savior, I will... Stop, I said. I'm here under the CEO's written direction. Screen recorded. Witnessed. I haven't touched a line without authorization. And on IP. Remember? I didn't take anything. I documented what you ignored. Rachel rounded the corner with a printout. Eva, she said, neutral. You'll want to see this. She handed me a log excerpt. A failed attempt to alter an audit flag from a workstation labeled CFO-ASST-02. Denied. Logged. Stamped. I looked at him. Not angry, tired. This is why we build seatbelts. He didn't answer. He stepped back like a man rehearsing a different story. Back in the huddle room, I emailed the CEO. Deliverables by Friday. Dual owner design, runbook draft, deputy training plan, client-facing SLA, recommendation for third-party review. I attached the control failure log with a short note. Attempted audit alteration blocked. Recommend internal review. Quick pause. If you're listening and you've ever been told, just make it work. Here's the truth. Making it work without guardrails is gambling with someone else's money. Governance isn't theater. It's respect. When I stepped into the CEO's office, legal was already seated. A folder on the table, a pen, 3 empty chairs. Let's talk about permanent structure, the CEO said. For the first time all day, the clock felt like it finally belonged to me. The CEO's office was cooler than the rest of the floor, deliberately so. Thick carpet, framed degrees, a shelf of leadership books no one ever read past the first chapter. Legal counsel sat near the window with a file open, glasses low on her nose. The CEO gestured for me to sit opposite him. Ava, he said, steady but weary. You've proven your point today, but I don't want patchwork. I want structure. Structure, the word I'd been waiting for. I slid into the chair, folded my hands, and let him continue. Our biggest client nearly walked this morning. I can't afford that kind of exposure again. What will it take to make sure this doesn't happen? First, I said, you acknowledge this wasn't sabotage. It was design. The system froze because leadership ignored the rules. That needs to be clear, in writing. Legal nodded, already noted in the compliance memo. Good, I said. Second, we build resilience. Dual owner model, deputies trained, documented runbooks. And not just as lip service. It becomes policy, enforced by audit. Every change, every calibration, logged with names. If you want safety, you don't cut corners. The CEO leaned back. And your role? I don't return under the CFO, I said. No more games. If you want me, I report directly to you. No interference. His jaw tightened, but not in resistance. More like calculation. That will be unusual. So is building your financial engine around one person, I said. But here we are. Legal scribbled a note. Direct reporting can be formalized. Title upgrade to Director of Predictive Systems. Compensation adjustment? I didn't blink. We'll discuss a performance clause. My value isn't a market average. It's proven outcomes. The client contract alone covers my salary 10 times over. Silence followed, the kind that makes men in power measure whether they can push you back. The CEO didn't try. Fine, he said. Direct reporting, performance clause, and you'll train deputies? Within 60 days, but I choose them. Not HR, not finance. People I trust to do the work, not politics. Agreed. The door opened then. The CFO slipped inside like he owned the place, jaw set, shoulders stiff. I should be present for this discussion, he said. No, the CEO replied without looking at him. You shouldn't. His face flushed. I'm the chief financial officer. Who authorized a termination without briefing me? The CEO cut in, his voice sharp as glass. Who nearly cost us our largest client because you didn't understand the infrastructure you were cutting. Legal cleared her throat. For the record, Eva's system flagged an attempted audit alteration earlier today. Workstation trace linked to CFO support staff. The CFO's mouth twitched. A misunderstanding. Someone exploring permissions. Enough, the CEO said. Leave. For a moment, I thought he'd argue. Instead, he turned, stiff as marble, and walked out without another word. The door shut too hard behind him. The CEO looked back at me. He won't last the week. That's your decision, I said, calm even. Mine is making sure the company doesn't burn down while executives play musical chairs. Legal slid the draft agreement across the desk. Consultant no more. Effective immediately, Director of Predictive Systems. Reporting directly to the CEO clause for performance-based compensation to be negotiated. Authority to select and train deputies. Mandate to document processes within 60 days. The words sat heavy on the page, like bricks rebuilding a wall. I read every line. Acceptable, I said finally, and signed. For the first time since this began, the CEO exhaled with something close to relief. Ava? Thank you. I stood, gathering the folder. Don't thank me yet. This is only the foundation. The house still needs to stand when the storm comes. As I walked out, staff were whispering in the hall. Not the frantic whispers of panic, but the kind you hear when tides change. Eyes followed me, then flicked quickly away. People know when power shifts. They can smell it in the air. At my desk, temporary, still marked consultant, Rachel handed me a stack of logs. Client confirmed their purchase order. They want the SLA by Friday. And she lowered her voice. There are more traces from the CFO's team. Nothing got through, but they tried twice more. Document everything, I said. Quietly. If he's desperate enough to poke holes, he's desperate enough to cover tracks. She nodded. Understood. I sat, opened the laptop, and for the first time that day, allowed myself a moment of stillness. Not triumph, just clarity. They had tried to erase me. Instead, I'd carved my name deeper into the stone. Quick pause. If you're listening, here's the message. When someone tells you you're replaceable, remember this. Replaceable is what people call you when they don't understand your value. Quiet doesn't mean disposable. Sometimes it means indispensable. And by the end of this week, the company would learn exactly what that word meant. 2 days later, the boardroom felt different. Not calmer, just quieter in a way that meant everyone was choosing their words carefully. The long table gleamed under the lights. Untouched coffee cups lined up like props in a play. I walked in with my laptop under my arm and a thin folder in my hand. The deputy training schedule, the runbook draft, and the SLA for clients. Deliverables promised, delivered. The CEO gave a small nod as I took my seat. Not at the far end this time, but halfway down, close enough that no one mistook me for an outsider. The CFO's chair, I noticed, was empty. No jacket slung over it, no pad of notes. Word had traveled fast. He was out. Effective immediately. The meeting opened with routine numbers, but all eyes drifted toward me when the client contract renewal came up. The CEO gestured my way. Eva has ensured continuity. She'll brief you. I stood, projected the dashboard, and walked them through the controls as if they'd always been part of the system. No drama, no grandstanding, just facts. The dual owner protocol, the training plan, the fail-safes. I kept my tone level, professional, the way you speak when you know panic is contagious but calm is stronger. When I finished, one of the senior board members, a man who'd barely acknowledged me before, leaned forward. Impressive work. Why wasn't this documented earlier? I didn't flinch. It was offered, twice, but the requests were dropped for more urgent priorities. Urgency is rarely the same as importance. A silence followed, thick but thoughtful. Then he nodded once, almost to himself. The CEO closed his folder. Effective immediately, Eva is reinstated as Director of Predictive Systems, reporting directly to me. Compensation will reflect the critical nature of her role. No applause. Just nods, one after another, like dominoes tipping in agreement. And that was better than clapping. Respect isn't noise, it's weight. I sat back down, closed my laptop, and felt the shift settle. Not fireworks, not revenge shouted from rooftops, just balance restored. Later, in the hallway, Rachel caught up with me. Strange, isn't it? She said. How fast things change. Not strange, I said. Just overdue. She smiled, then left me with my thoughts. Walking out of the building, the air felt different. Lighter. For 15 years, I'd been the quiet one in the corner. The one who held everything together without asking for recognition. Quiet had been mistaken for replaceable. But now, finally, they understood. Quiet doesn't mean disposable. Quiet means essential. And sometimes the loudest statement you can make is simply not disappearing. Quick pause. If you've been following this story, remember this. People may underestimate you, call you background, even try to erase you. But truth has a way of forcing its way into the room. And when it does, the seat at the table is yours.